Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're here for Rosten's Reviews, episode number 5. We made it again. Another great week here at BMS and another great week in Mr. Rosten's Social Studies class. So this week we had a big week because we actually started looking at some early human history, and we started our first historical investigation looking at Ötzi the Iceman. And our overall question for this historical investigation is, how did Ötzi the Iceman die? So we had a big week this week. We started in the cafeteria, or not in the cafeteria, excuse me, in the auditorium, and we set the scene for Ötzi the Iceman. So we started in the auditorium, and we looked at this nice little presentation. Okay. So we started off with Ötzi. We went over the bell ringer, and we reviewed inferences and observations. And if you remember, an inference is an educated guess, and then an observation is something that you notice or you see. So we went over that, and our first artifact analysis was Ötzi himself. So we started going over how Ötzi was. We figured out what he was made out of. And he was made out of bone, obviously. We observed his part. We observed Ötzi himself. He looked yellowish and kind of brownish, and he was obviously very old, and he was human. And Mrs. Donovan held up a skeleton to show size, and he was about 5'3". So we observed his parts, and then we made sense of it, or at least we tried to. Who was he? What did he do for a living? Why was he there? All right. So then after we analyzed Ötzi, we did our first artifact, which was this nice wooden birch canister, right? And we used our artifact analysis guide to figure it out. We said that it was made out of wood. We said that it was made out of wood. We went and observed it, and we said that it was wood colored, kind of tannish, had some black lines in there throughout. It looked old. It looked like it was missing a piece right up here. And then we tried to make sense of what it was. So we said maybe it was a backpack or a canister of some sort. And why he had it was he used it to carry his things, which we would then take a look at. We talked about group norms, and these are the same group norms that we're going to use throughout the year, especially when we're working in small groups. So we have be an active participant. So that means staying on task, working well with others. We be open and respectful to others' ideas. And then the most importantly was to stay on task and make sure you are completing the work that needs to be completed. We then went through the artifacts, okay? We had his leggings and pants. We had his cap, which we found out was made out of bear skin and bear fur, which was pretty awesome. We had the bow and arrow and some of his arrows. We had his coat, which we actually found out later in the week that was made out of goat and sheep skin. It was very interesting. We have his copper axe. Copper. And why is that important? Because we know what time period he comes from. We had his flint dagger. We had his knife sharpener. We had the stone disc, which held the birds that he captured, after he hunted. And then, of course, we had his shoe. Okay? So we did that. Here's just a little peek of the inferences and observations that we went over. We found out that an observation is, describing the artifact as if you were explaining it to someone, and an inference is a conclusion or opinion that is formed based on known facts. All right, so we did that, and we had a pretty good time doing that. Hello again. All right, so we started off with Ötzi. We met the artifacts that were around him. And then the next day and the next 2 days, we were actually really trying to figure out who he was and why he died. How did he die? And this is the question that we're going to kind of keep on looking at until the end of the unit. So the next thing we did after, my mouse froze. Come on, work with me. After that was we looked at the map of where he was found, and we answered some questions, some inferences we could make. We taped in our notebooks this body graphic organizer, items found at the scene, and then we annotated this background information essay on Ötzi. So if you remember, we used the 6 points of annotation, to annotate. And this week we focused on 3 things. 1, finding the topic sentences, which you'll see on the screen are blue. And in orange, we bracketed the important information that tells us about the topic sentence. And then on the margins, we put a star and we summarized what we learned in our own words. And that was super important because it helps us to create a better understanding if we can say what we learned in our own words. So we did that. And then following that, we had to try to figure out some answers to some questions. So after we annotated, the next day we came in. We started off with, based on the information you already know, who was Ötzi the Iceman. We came up with some ideas based on the evidence that we had. And then we answered some questions. Okay, so we used TTQA format, right, which means turn the question around. And we answered some of these questions. And then if you didn't get to it in class for homework, you had to answer this question. Our investigative group came up with the following decision as to how Ötzi the Iceman may have died. And you need to write that in 1 paragraph. So we know that a paragraph is 4 to 6 sentences, and you need evidence or important information to support your answer. Okay? Pretty simple stuff. So we're just starting to dig into Ötzi right now. Again, we're trying to focus on figuring out who he is, how people lived during that time period, and how he died. Okay? So, big week. Big week. We met Ötzi. We analyzed some artifacts. We did some close reading strategies with annotating. Whew! And we answered questions in TTQA format. That's a big week for me, man. I don't know about you guys, but I am exhausted. So next week, okay, we're really going to launch into Ötzi. We're going to look at some possible death theories. You're going to choose the one that you think is the most likely. I'm going to give you an article. You're going to annotate it, okay? And then you're going to use that article and all the evidence that we've gathered so far to write 2 paragraphs, 2, not that scary, 2 paragraphs about how Ötzi died and who he was. Pretty simple stuff next week, okay? So I know next week on Monday we have an emergency early dismissal because it's a makeup day. But then the rest of the week seems pretty standard. Okay, we have a full day on Tuesday, so no early dismissal. And then the rest of the week we're going to be looking at death theories and annotating articles. And then we're going to start the cause of death and start answering our first historical investigation question. And I'm super excited. The week after that, still unknown. But, you know, we'll figure it out. We always do. Maybe we'll start with some Mesopotamia. Who knows? Anyway, so this week, to recap, we met Ötzi. We're trying to figure out who he was. We're trying to figure out how people lived during Ötzi's time. And then we're trying to figure out how he died. We worked on artifact analysis. We worked on annotating with which is a close reading strategy to try to identify critical content or important information, also known as evidence. And then you are writing your now second prediction about how Ötzi died based on the evidence that you've gathered so far. And I'm very excited to see what you guys think next week. All right, so that's all I've got for this week. Nothing major happening in social studies other than Ötzi. A few reminders for you, though. 1, your team building, 6th grade team building permission slip and money is due on Tuesday. So make sure you bring that in. It's a really cool activity. It really helps you get to know your classmates. And since we are, again, since we are such a big district, it is utterly important for you to get to know your classmates better. Okay, so bring in that permission slip. Make sure you check Power School today. It's Friday. Check Power School. Make sure you know what you're missing if you're missing anything. Make sure you're contacting your teachers to let them know that you're missing things and you're going to get that work in. Remember, Mr. Rosten always takes late work. Will you get full credit? No, because you didn't hand it in on time. We need to learn some responsibility. Hand in your work on time. Every day it's late, it's 10% off, and it's capped at 30%. So if you're more than 3 classes late, the best you can get is a 70, but a 70 is definitely much better than a 0. I think so. I'd rather have a 70 than a 0. But again, I'm just Mr. Rosten. What do I know? Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. You all worked really hard this week. I'm super proud of you. Next week, you need to figure out how Uzi died and be able to write it down and tell me. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have in store. All right? So have an awesome weekend. Be safe. Don't be stupid. I'll see you all next week. This has been Mr. Rosten's Reviews. If you liked what you saw, please hit the like button on the bottom of the screen. Make sure you hit the bell to subscribe. Subscribe to the channel so that way you know every time that I go live or post a video. I really hope that this has been a nice review for you, even though it's been a little quick. That's all I got. Have a great weekend. Peace. I'm out.